On September 24th, Ahmed al-Sharaa took the podium at the UN General Assembly. Less than a year ago, to most diplomats in the room, he was a wanted terrorist, with the US State Department offering a $10 million bounty for his head. Today, as Syria's new president, he has traded his military fatigues for a suit, and his alias, Abu Mohammed al-Julani, for his real name. His journey from the Syrian battlefield, where he once led al-Qaeda's local affiliate, to the heart of global diplomacy, where he now seeks international recognition, may be the clearest illustration of how just tangled the Syrian civil war has become. On December 8, 2024, fighters of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham under Shara's command marched into Damascus, bringing an end to 50 years of Assad family rule. The lightning offensive, lasting just 11 days, forced Bashar al-Assad to flee to Moscow and stunned observers around the world. From the Umayyad Mosque, one of the Islam's oldest holy sites, Shara delivered a victory speech, declaring, quote, a new chapter in the history of the region, and promising justice, equality, and protection for all minorities. For millions of Syrians exhausted by 13 years of brutal conflict, his words carried the long-awaited promise of peace. But euphoria quickly gave way to harsh reality. The fall of Assad did not end the civil war. It merely opened a new, perhaps even more complicated chapter. Instead of peace, Syria sank into another wave of violence. Ethno-sectarian tensions reignited, unleashing brutal massacres of Alawites. In the south, Damascus now faces an Israeli military intervention aimed at turning southern Syria into a de facto Israeli protectorate. Meanwhile, in the north looms the specter of another intervention, this time by Turkey. Despite pragmatic ties with Damascus, Ankara is increasingly frustrated by the unresolved Kurdish question. Assad may be gone, but Syria's Game of Thrones is far from over. The players have changed, but the rules of the game remain as ruthless as ever. It is time to take a closer look at the new balance of power on the Syrian chessboard, and meet those now holding the strongest cards. The new chapter of Syria's conflict shows just how unpredictable geopolitics can be. In a region where power shifts overnight, alliances crumble, and new players emerge from the chaos, one thing is certain: global events move markets just as fast as they reshape borders. When politics and conflict rewrite the balance of power, it pays to have tools that let you act, not just watch. That is why I use XTB, the investment platform that gives you instant access to global markets. With XTB, you can trade thousands of stocks and ETFs, commission-free up to 100,000 euros in monthly turnover. Whether you see opportunity in energy markets, adjusting to Middle Eastern instability, in defense industries expanding their influence, or in emerging economies adapting to new realities, every global trend can become an investment idea. Check the link in the description, and by doing so you support this channel. Remember that investing always involves risk. We have to begin our story with the man who now holds the keys to Damascus, Ahmed al-Sharaa. His biography is as complex as the Syrian civil war itself. Born in Saudi Arabia, he grew up in Damascus before joining Al-Qaeda and fighting against US forces in Iraq. For years, he was the face of the most radical wing of the Syrian rebellion, with the US State Department offering a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. But in 2016, Sharaa broke away from the path of global jihad. He cut ties with Al-Qaeda and shifted toward a more pragmatic, moderate stance. Pushed back along with the remnants of the rebellion into Idlib province, the last rebel stronghold, he carved out a small state that survived only thanks to the rivalry between Turkey, Russia and Iran. For years, Shaara's enclave was seen as little more than a curiosity, hardly a real threat to Assad's grip on power. Yet in December 2024, it was from Idlib that the offensive was launched, which in just 11 days swept the Assad clan from the Syrian chessboard. Under the constitutional declaration announced in March 2025, Sharaa assumed the presidency for 5 years, matching the transitional period. Officially, this is a time of national recovery and democratic reform. But the devil, as always, is in the details. The declaration granted Sharaa very broad powers. With the office of Prime Minister abolished, he now heads the government. On paper, it looks open and inclusive. There is a woman and representatives of minorities, but in practice, it is dominated by his closest associates. The most important posts, such as the Interior, Defense and Foreign Affairs ministries, are filled by old comrades in arms from his al-Qaeda days. It is still too early for final judgments, but this setup raises suspicions that what we are seeing is not a transformation, but merely a swap of elites. Nothing prevents Sharaa from building an autocratic system similar to the Assad clans, only dressed in new ideological clothes. Shaara's promises of a new unified Syria were quickly tested by brutal reality. In March, a wave of violence swept the Alawite stronghold on the coast, Assad's home community. It began with clashes between loyalists of the former president and government forces. In retaliation, recent rebels, now formally part of the new Syrian army, poured into Latakia and carried out massacres of civilians. According to reports, fighters went house to house, asking one simple question: "Are you an Alawite?" The answer determined life or death. It is estimated that about 2,000 civilians were killed. Damascus disavowed the massacres, claiming that they were carried out by, quote, undisciplined elements rather than regular troops. That leaves room for speculation about Shaara's role in the events. Yet the massacre, shocking as it was, did not undermine his rule. For a simple reason: the Alawites had no powerful external protector. Brutally put, no one cared about their fate. The situation in the south of the country looks very different, where Sharaa has entered into conflict with the Druze. Unlike the Alawites, they were not alone. Israel stepped in, not for humanitarian reasons, but because of Prime Minister Netanyahu's grand designs for the southern Syria. On December 8th, as rebels entered Damascus, the Israeli military launched Operation Arrow of Bashan. Within 48 hours, the Israeli Air Force and Navy carried out over 350 strikes across Syria, destroying roughly 80% of Assad's remaining heavy equipment. At the same time, Israeli ground forces crossed the so-called Purple Line, manned by UN troops since 1974 as the de facto Syrian-Israeli border. The IDF seized a string of strategic positions on the Syrian side, including Mount Hermon, often called the Eyes of the Middle East. As the highest peak of the anti-Lebanon range, Hermon towers over both Syria and Lebanon. By deploying advanced SIGINT and early warning systems there, Israel gained an unprecedented ability to monitor troop movements and intercept communications deep inside both countries. Officially, the goal of Operation Arrow of Bashan was to prevent chaos after Assad's fall from spilling across the border. In reality, Netanyahu's ambitions are far greater: to turn southern Syria into an Israeli protectorate. The key to this plan lies with Syria's minorities, above all, the Druze. Why the Druze? It's all about geopolitics and religion. The Druze are an ethno-religious minority living across Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. On the Syrian side, they are concentrated in Suwaida province, where they make up about 90% of the population. Even under Assad, the region enjoyed autonomy, with local Druze militias as the real power. The fall of Damascus left them in a precarious position. As non-Muslims, they view Shara's rise with deep suspicion, making them a natural ally for any external actor. Israel seized this opportunity by activating its historic trump card, ties with its own Druze minority. For generations, Israeli Druze have served loyally in the army. Netanyahu decided to offer their cousins across the border a similar deal: autonomy for Suvaida, under the umbrella of an Israeli protectorate. At first, Netanyahu's plan fell flat. The Druze leadership declared loyalty to Syria and opened talks with Shara's government on bringing Suvaida back under Damascus' control. But the negotiations quickly stalled, with mistrust on both sides leading to frequent clashes. By July 2025, tensions boiled over. Damascus decided to settle the Druze question by force. Government columns rolled into Suvaida, gradually breaking Druze resistance, until Israeli aircraft intervened, bombing Shara's forces and forcing them to retreat. The July battles transformed the strategic picture. They discredited Druze leaders who favored compromise with Damascus and elevated Sheikh Hikmat al-Hijri, who advocated close cooperation with Israel from the start. Now Israeli money and weapons flow freely to Druze militias, and Netanyahu's protectorate plan is taking real shape. For Damascus, the unresolved Druze issue is a strategic nightmare, giving Israel long-term leverage over Syria's internal affairs. And Netanyahu's ambitions go further. He demands the demilitarization of neighboring Quneitra and Dara, something Damascus cannot accept. Israel's aggressive expansion in southern Syria is not just a problem for Shara, but also for the White House. Donald Trump has his own designs for new Syrian opening. US policy towards Syria perfectly illustrates Washington's flexibility in applying its own principles. Yesterday's terrorist, once carrying a $10 million bounty, can become today's key partner. For Donald Trump, the businessman president, Ahmed al-Shara's past is of little importance. In his world, foreign policy looks more like a reality show casting call than a cabinet debate. Trump doesn't pore over intelligence dossiers. He judges people by a handshake, force of character, and whether they can sell him a good story. And it was precisely such a story, that of a former terrorist who could now become America's partner and help wrench Syria from Iran's orbit, that the Saudis pitched to Trump. When Trump visited Saudi Arabia in May, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman seized the opportunity. He brought Shara to Riyadh and arranged a meeting. Shara promised to normalize relations with Israel and join the Abraham Accords. That was enough for Trump, who announced he would lift all sanctions on Syria. In effect, Trump gave Syria a fresh start in exchange for a pro-American course. But his plan ran into one obstacle: Benjamin Netanyahu, who would rather bomb Damascus than negotiate with Shara. Meanwhile, as attention focused on southern Syria, another crisis was brewing in the north. President Erdogan began weighing yet another military operation. And as always, the reason was Syria's Kurds. Back in 2012, Recep Tayyip Erdogan promised supporters he would soon pray at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. He did not expect two things: that he would wait over a decade for Assad's fall, and that the new master of Damascus would be Ahmed al-Shara. This was not Ankara's preferred outcome. For years, Turkey had poured money and weapons into pro-Turkish rebel groups, expecting them to seize power and pull Syria into Ankara's orbit. Today, even though Shara was not Turkey's first choice, Ankara sees the new Syria as a crucial partner for advancing its two main goals. The first is resolving the refugee crisis. At the time of Assad's downfall, around 3 million Syrians were in Turkey, straining the economy and fueling constant social tensions. A stable Syria under a friendly government is Ankara's only hope for a mass return. Nearly 500,000 people have already gone back. but 2.5 million remain. The second and far more important priority is settling the Kurdish question once and for all. Turkey needs a strong, centralized authority in Damascus to crush any Kurdish aspirations, not only for independence, but even for autonomy. Ankara will never accept a federalized Syria, seeing it as a direct threat to Turkey's own territorial integrity. That is why Ankara welcomed the March agreement between Damascus and the Kurds, which called for integrating Kurdish fighters into the Syrian army. The deal, however, never took effect, and Turkey's patience is running thin. According to unofficial reports, Ankara has warned Damascus that if no compromise with the Kurds is reached by year's end, it will launch another military intervention. The presence of US bases in Kurdish territory is a moderating factor, but Ankara seems confident it can persuade Trump to give the green light for the operation. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates also have major stakes in the game. While Turkey and Israel pursue their goals through force, the Gulf states are preparing to play a different kind of hand. They hold key to what matters most for the new Syria: money for reconstruction. In the early years of the civil war, Riyadh and Abu Dhabi poured money into the Sunni rebellion, hoping for Assad's swift downfall. When that failed and Assad grew increasingly dependent on Iran, the Gulf states reversed course and reconciled with Damascus. The logic was simple: better to deal with Assad than watch Syria turn into an Iranian satellite. Today, with Assad gone, the same logic applies. Only now Turkey has replaced Iran as the chief rival. For Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, a Syria dominated by Ankara would be a strategic nightmare, the realization of Erdogan's neo-Ottoman ambitions. That is why they are eager to bolster Shara's government, giving it enough independence to resist Turkish pressure. Saudi Arabia has already pledged at least $6.4 billion in Syrian investments. The UAE is not far behind. Dubai-based logistics giant DP World signed an $800 million deal to develop the strategic port of Tartus. This is not humanitarian aid. It is the purchase of, quote, geopolitical shares in the new Syria. Yet the Syrian chessboard would be incomplete without two players who, until December, were holding the cards: Iran and Russia. For Iran, Assad's fall was a strategic disaster. It struck not only at Tehran's influence in Syria, but at its entire security architecture, the axis of resistance. The new government in Damascus, remembering Iran's massive support for Assad, treats Tehran as an enemy. The Iranian embassy, stormed by protesters right after the regime collapsed, remains shut. Damascus has banned Iranian citizens and goods from entering, and officials are even weighing $300 billion in war reparations from Iran. All pro-Iranian militias have officially left Syria. What remains are hidden IRGC networks still trying to smuggle weapons to Hezbollah, but Syrian security forces are steadily dismantling them. With Moscow, things played out differently. When rebels launched their offensive in December 2024, Russia didn't move a finger to save Assad. Instead, it quickly reached out to Ahmed al-Sharaa, recognizing the new reality. The payoff was clear. Russia's embassy stayed open, and its key bases, Khmeimim and Tartus, remain intact. Sharaa spoke with Vladimir Putin and floated the idea of a fresh start. Putin invited him to Moscow in October, the same city now hosting Assad in exile. But this harmony comes at a cost. Confident in his position, Sharaa is pressing the Kremlin hard. Talks are underway on Russia's bases and repayment of Syria's staggering $20 billion debt to Russia. Damascus has also cancelled Russia's contract to manage Tartus and wants to stop printing its currency in Russia. Still, Assad's Syria had grown so dependent on Moscow that replacing it overnight is impossible. Therefore, Sharaa's pragmatism is essentially a cold calculation. It could be said that Russia has managed to preserve its physical foothold in Syria, but not its status. From being the key power broker, it has been demoted to the role of a piece on someone else's board. Sharaa is cynically using Russia's military presence as a bargaining chip in talks with Turkey, Israel, and the United States. In this new complex game, surprising alliances are emerging. Moscow has even become a card in Prime Minister Netanyahu's deck, as he lobbies Washington for quiet US consent to keep Russia's bases in Syria. In Netanyahu's view, Russia's presence could act as a brake on Ankara's ambitions. And thus, Assad's fall did not end Syria's Game of Thrones. It merely opened a new, even more unpredictable chapter. The pieces on the chessboard have changed, but the stakes remain the same: control over the heart of the Levant. And at the center of this contest stands Ahmed al-Sharaa, a victor who is also a hostage. His position is a strategic paradox, so let's summarize it. He is Syria's president, yet his authority over the country is largely illusory. The northeast remains under Kurdish control, with whom Damascus has failed to reach any compromise for months. This frustrates the Turks, who threaten yet another military intervention. In the south, the situation is even worse. Sharaa faces not only deadlock with the Druze, but also a creeping Israeli incursion, whose ultimate goal is to strip him of control over all territory south of the capital. The complexity of Sharaa's position is visible in every aspect of his policy. The new president tries to keep every option open, except toward Iran, against which he has taken a clearly hostile stance. He cultivates ties with Turkey, while using Gulf petrodollars as a financial counterweight to avoid being pulled into Ankara's orbit. Likewise, he balances between Washington and Moscow, deepening relations with Trump to secure sanctions relief, while at the same time maintaining dialogue with Putin and allowing Russia's bases to remain in place, treating them as a valuable bargaining chip. In his first months in office, Sharaa has emerged as a deft politician, skillfully balancing the demands of rival powers, yet the dangers he faces are immense. In the end, he could be crushed between Turkey and Israel, two states with sharply different visions for post-Assad Syria. Ankara seeks a strong centralized state, while Israel pushes for federalization. Ironically, Syria's best hope might lie with the United States. President Trump, frustrated with Netanyahu's hardline policies and determined to add Syria to the Abraham Accords, has the leverage to press Israel toward compromise. The question is whether he will move from private irritation to open public pressure. There are signs he might. In September 2025, Trump forced Netanyahu into accepting a Gaza plan that included a phased IDF withdrawal and international oversight of reconstruction under his personal leadership. If he could compel concessions on Gaza, an issue central to Israel's politics, he may be able to do the same on Syria, which carries less weight in Jerusalem. For now, uncertainty dominates. At the center of the storm stands Ahmed al-Sharaa. His authority and ability to maneuver between powers remain the only glue holding together the battered Syrian state after 13 years of civil war. Without him, Syria could again fragment along ethnic and geopolitical lines. The Syrian Game of Thrones is ultimately a fight for Sharaa's own survival. His rise from Idlib to the halls of the UN was unprecedented, but the true test of leadership lies ahead. Will the former Al-Qaeda emir reinvent himself as a statesman capable of uniting a fractured nation and resisting stronger players? Or will he, like so many before him, be broken by the ruthless logic of great power politics? For now, the game continues, and all eyes are on the new lion of Damascus.